15,000 years ago, ice ruled the planet. Mammoths wandered the frozen plains, coastlines stretched miles beyond today's seas, and small bands of humans struggled to survive on the edge of a thawing world. Then, almost overnight, everything changed. The climate went haywire. Temperatures crashed, glaciers surged forward, storms tore through entire regions, and oceans began creeping higher. Rivers spilled over, coastlines vanished, and floods swallowed lands where humans once hunted and lived. It was as if the earth itself had turned against its inhabitants. This dramatic, thousand-year upheaval is known as the Younger Dryas, but that simple name barely captures the scale of destruction. For those who lived through it, it must have felt like the world itself was ending. And here's the intriguing part. Nearly every culture around the globe carries stories of a great flood, from Mesopotamia to India, among the Hopi of North America, Aboriginal Australians, and countless Pacific islands. There are tales of waters so vast they nearly wiped humanity from the face of the earth. Survivors cling to boats, mountaintops, or hidden refuges. Entire worlds drown. Could these legends be more than myth? Could they actually be echoes of the Younger Dryas passed down across millennia? Remember, there was no writing back then. Knowledge traveled by word of mouth generation after generation. Over time, facts merged with symbolism. But the core truth remained. The world was flooded. Civilizations fell. And from the ruins, new ones had to rise. And the haunting question is, what was lost? If humans already lived along coasts, rivers, and fertile plains now buried beneath the waves, then entire chapters of our history may be gone forever. Cities swallowed, knowledge erased, monuments ground down by time and tide. Today, archaeologists and divers are just starting to uncover these hidden worlds, submerged structures in inland seas, mysterious ruins beneath the Mediterranean, and landscapes that once linked Britain to Europe. What if the Great Flood wasn't a single event, but the global echo of the Younger Dryas, a catastrophe etched not in books, but in the memories of those who survived and rebuilt from ice and mud? And it makes you wonder, if the world drowned once before, what treasures and secrets did it take with it? And what clues are still waiting for us to find? Thousands of years ago, the Earth began to warm. Ice sheets that had blanketed continents for tens of thousands of years were finally retreating. Massive glacial lakes held back by walls of ice spread across North America. Overflowing rivers carried enormous volumes of water to the oceans. To the humans alive at that time, hunter-gatherers scattered across the land, the world must have felt like it was awakening. Forests were reclaiming old ground, game roamed freely. The Ice Age seemed to be ending, and a future of plenty appeared just over the horizon. Then almost suddenly everything shifted. The climate snapped back into a frigid grip. Temperatures in the northern hemisphere plunged by as much as 15 degrees C, undoing centuries of warming. Retreating glaciers surged forward again. Seasons became unpredictable. Winters grew long and harsh, summers short and punishing. Rivers froze and then burst their banks. Fertile plains turned to frost-bound wastelands. This was the Younger Dryas, a sudden thousand-year cold period that interrupted the end of the Ice Age and changed the course of human history. The shock wasn't just the cold, it was the speed. Normally, climate drifts slowly over millennia, but this happened in just decades. A parent might experience a temperate world while their children grew up in a frozen nightmare. What triggered this abrupt reversal? One leading explanation points to water too much of it too fast. As the massive ice sheets melted, enormous lakes formed across North America. At some point, the ice dams holding them back gave way. Torrents of meltwater rushed north into the Arctic Ocean, disrupting the Atlantic currents that normally carry warmth from the tropics. With that system thrown off balance, Europe and much of the northern hemisphere plunged into deep freeze. But water might not tell the full story. Another idea points to fire from the sky, a cosmic impact. Around 12,800 years ago, fragments of a comet, or perhaps an entire celestial body, may have struck the planet, sparking wildfires, hurling debris into the atmosphere, and triggering the sudden chill. This comet hypothesis, promoted by researchers like Richard Firestone and Alan West, and explored by writers such as Graham Hancock, remains hotly debated. Skeptics argue the evidence is scattered, while supporters cite a mysterious black layer found across North America and beyond, packed with nanodiamonds, melted minerals, and charcoal, all pointing to something catastrophic. Whatever the cause, the results were nothing short of apocalyptic. Imagine North America at the time. Massive glacial lakes like Agassiz and Missoula stretched for hundreds of miles. These weren't calm waters, they were pressure cookers, held back by fragile ice walls. When the dams failed, floods erupted on a scale almost beyond imagination. Walls of water carved the land to bedrock, hurled boulders the size of houses, and left scars still visible today. The scablands of Washington state are living evidence of these cataclysms. Dry riverbeds stretch for miles, as if carved for giants. Standing there, you could have witnessed a wave taller than a skyscraper racing at you, roaring like thunder, consuming everything in its path. And it didn't happen just once. These floods repeated, reshaping valleys and rivers again and again, while oceans themselves climbed higher elsewhere. By the end of the Ice Age, global sea levels had risen by more than 120 meters. Entire coastlines disappeared beneath the waves. Fertile river deltas were submerged, and islands vanished entirely. While most of this happened over centuries, some evidence points to sudden, massive surges, catastrophic jumps that would have been noticeable within a single human lifetime. Imagine living in a coastal village, watching the sea inch closer each year, only for a single storm or tidal surge to wipe your home off the map. How many ancient settlements now lie buried under hundreds of meters of water, erased by tides and currents? Could these submerged lands be the origin of flood myths in cultures worldwide? Stories of Atlantis in Greece, Yiz in France, Dwarka in India were these purely legends, or echoes of real cities swallowed by the post-Ice Age seas? And water wasn't the only danger. Fire, too, may have swept across the planet. Sediment layers from the start of the Younger Dryas show a thick black mat packed with soot, charcoal, and evidence of massive burning. Entire regions may have been engulfed in firestorms, whether sparked by comet fragments or by environmental chain reactions. Smoke and dust would have darkened the skies. For those living through it, the sun might have appeared as a dull red ember, with stars hidden for weeks. The world would have been filled with the smell of ash and decay. This period of burning coincided with one of Earth's most dramatic extinctions. Mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, and giant ground sloths all vanished in what is, in geological terms, the blink of an eye. For thousands of years, humans had lived alongside these giants, hunted them, and relied on them. Then, almost overnight, they were gone. Was it human hunting that finished them off, or the catastrophic environmental shifts of the Younger Dryas, or both? Losing these creatures wasn't just a loss of food, it was the disappearance of a familiar world, the end of an age of giants. Living through this era meant constant uncertainty. One season brought devastating floods, the next raging fires, the next freezing winters. Landscapes could change within a single lifetime. Hunting grounds vanished as animals migrated or died out. forests shifted, grasslands withered, and fertile valleys drowned. Humans were forced to move, adapt, and survive in ways that must have seemed impossible. And in such chaos, what stories would they tell? How would they explain the world unraveling around them? Perhaps they spoke of gods punishing the earth or cosmic battles in the skies. Perhaps they recounted floods so enormous that entire communities were wiped away, preserving these memories as myths that would last thousands of years. One of the most intriguing mysteries tied to this upheaval lies beneath the waves. We know coastlines shifted dramatically. Continental shelves now under shallow seas were once dry, habitable land. If early humans preferred living near water, as people often do, then countless homes, villages, and possibly cities now lie submerged. Think of Doggerland, once a fertile plain connecting Britain to mainland Europe, now under the North Sea. Or the submerged ruins off Yonaguni in Japan, which some argue are human-made. In India's Gulf of Khambat, sonar surveys hint at ancient structures buried in mud, though debate continues. If thriving communities once lined these coasts, the floods of the Younger Dryas could have obliterated them, leaving only scattered remnants and oral traditions. And there's also the unsettling possibility of something falling from the sky. Proponents of the comet hypothesis suggest fragments of a disintegrating comet struck North American ice sheets, triggering both fire and flood. Evidence like nanodiamonds, shock quartz, and melt glass droplets may mark such an impact. Survivors would have looked up in terror, a blazing streak across the heavens followed by fire raining down. To ancient eyes, it could only have been divine wrath or the fury of spirits. When we read myths of fiery serpents falling from the sky or stars plummeting to earth, could we actually be glimpsing ancient memories encoded in symbolic language? Nearly every culture on the planet has its own version of a flood story. In Mesopotamia, the gods unleash a deluge to wipe out humanity, sparing only Utnapishtim, who survives aboard a great vessel. In the Hebrew Bible, Noah builds an ark to ride out waters that cover the earth. The Greeks recount Deucalion and Pyrrha, who survive a flood sent by Zeus. The Hopis speak of a time when the waters rose and covered the land, while Aboriginal Australians tell of seas swallowing their coasts. Are these coincidences, independent inventions of imagination, or are they echoes of real events handed down through generations? If the Younger Dryas was indeed the great flood remembered in myth, then perhaps these stories are more than allegory. They are fragile threads connecting us to a time when the world itself nearly drowned. So, what exactly was the Younger Dryas? A natural hiccup in Earth's climate system? A catastrophe driven by ice, water, and shifting currents? Or a scar left by something sudden and violent falling from the sky? Whatever the cause, its consequences were world-shaping. It was 1,000 years of upheaval, a crucible that humanity passed through, forever altered. And as we'll see next, while the planet itself was in turmoil, the lives of the people trying to survive within it were just as disrupted. Were they merely scattered tribes clinging to survival, or were there entire cultures, maybe even civilizations, erased by the floodwaters? Archaeologists digging into layers from around 12,800 years ago, the start of the Younger Dryas, see something unusual. Distinct traditions disappear, tool styles vanish, populations that once thrived fall silent. It's as if human history itself was interrupted. Here, the true human cost of the Younger Dryas comes into focus not in charts or ice cores, but in the sudden absence of the people who once hunted, built, and lived across these lands. In North America, the Clovis culture is the clearest example. Once considered the continent's first culture, the Clovis people crafted fluted spear points perfect for hunting mammoths and other Ice Age giants. Yet around the onset of the Younger Dryas, they almost completely vanish from the record. Archaeologists debate why. One explanation points to the collapse of megafauna populations without mammoths and giant bison. Clovis hunting strategies became unsustainable. Another possibility is environmental upheaval. Floods, fires, and sudden climate shifts transformed landscapes. A more dramatic and controversial theory suggests comet impacts, debris raining down, triggering continent-wide fires, leaving behind thin layers of carbon and microscopic diamonds in the soil. Whatever the cause, the Clovis leave behind one of archaeology's sharpest breaks, evidence of a thriving culture that simply disappears. Across the ocean in the Levant, the Natufians were taking humanity in a different direction. Unlike the nomadic hunters of North America, they were experimenting with permanent villages, harvesting wild cereals, and laying the foundation for farming. Their round stone houses with central hearths, cemeteries, ornaments, and social organization point to communities on the brink of agricultural revolution. Then the Younger Dryas struck. Crops failed in the dry cold. Settlements broke apart. People returned to nomadic life. Farming would not fully recover until the climate stabilized centuries later. If the Natufians show what was lost, Göbekli Tepe in modern Turkey shows what might have emerged from the ashes. Built at the very end of the Younger Dryas, around 11,600 years ago, this site stunned archaeologists. Massive stone pillars, some weighing over 10 tons, were carved with animals and abstract symbols, arranged in monumental circles. The builders were supposed to be hunter-gatherers, yet here they were, moving megaliths and organizing large-scale communal labor. There's no clear precursor. Göbekli Tepe seems to appear almost out of nowhere. Was this a sudden leap in social complexity, or the continuation of ideas preserved from a culture wiped out by catastrophe, fragments of memory encoded in stone? Elsewhere, evidence shows that humanity wasn't as primitive as we sometimes imagine. Jericho in the Jordan Valley reveals signs of continuous occupation before and during the Younger Dryas. Its earliest settlements included stone walls and a remarkable 28-foot tower construction on a scale surprising for that era. Çatalhöyük in Anatolia, a bit later, shows how these early efforts toward complex living persisted after the climate stabilized. Houses were tightly clustered, interiors decorated with wall paintings, and communities displayed evidence of ritual practice and social organization. Were these achievements simply delayed by the Younger Dryas, or were they a direct response to environmental trauma, a rebuilding of society after catastrophe? Further afield, the evidence becomes more elusive, yet no less compelling. Off the coast of India, near Dwarka, divers have reported submerged structures that some believe are remnants of settlements lost to post-Ice Age sea level rise. In Japan, the Yonaguni Monument, a series of underwater terraces and stone formations, remains controversial. Whether natural or human-made, its timing coincides suspiciously with rapid sea level increases that drowned coastal plains and continental shelves. If early humans were clustering near fertile coasts, it's easy to imagine entire communities now resting beneath the waves. Even the archaeological record of trade hints at a sophistication often underestimated. Obsidian tools traveled hundreds of miles from their source through long-distance exchange networks, long before farming. Seashells moved inland, ochre pigments were traded, and stone materials transported across vast territories. These weren't isolated tribes. They were interconnected communities sharing goods, symbols, and technologies. Burials with grave goods, cave art, and figurines reveal shared rituals and cultural expression. If these groups were already moving toward villages, agriculture, and collective practices, then the Younger Dryas wasn't merely a pause, it was a full reset. Genetic evidence adds another dimension. Ancient DNA studies show population bottlenecks periods when human numbers sharply declined, consistent with a major stress event. Survivors rebuilt, carrying their genes forward, but the overall diversity of early human groups may have been permanently reduced. This loss of genetic variety mirrors the archaeological silence left by vanished cultures. Consider the simultaneous extinctions. Alongside the collapse of the Clovis culture, mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and giant ground sloths disappeared. Hunting may have contributed, but the timing and scale point to a catastrophic environmental trigger. For humans, these losses weren't just about food, they were shattered ecosystems. Grasslands became forests, hunting strategies failed, and entire lifeways had to be reinvented. The emerging picture is one of interrupted promise. Societies were experimenting with permanent settlements, farming, and ritual practices. Monumental projects like Gobekli Tepe and Jericho's Tower hinted leaps in organization. Trade networks spanned continents. Yet, just as humanity seemed poised to take the next step, the Younger Dryas forced a retreat, a reset of both people and culture. Like the Clovis, some cultures vanished entirely. Others, like the Natufians, reverted to nomadic ways. Still, some preserved the memory of what had come before, encoding it in stone monuments and stories to ensure that nothing was truly lost. This brings us to a haunting thought. If societies were already moving toward cities, monumental architecture, and complex rituals before the Younger Dryas, then the thousand-year storm didn't just slow progress, it wiped out entire chapters of human history. How many settlements now rest beneath the 120 meters of rising seas? How many stories of culture, innovation, and survival disappeared along with them? As we move forward, we turn to the stories that endured not in ruins or artifacts, but in myths passed down across generations. From Mesopotamia to the Andes, from India to the Pacific, tales of cataclysmic floods, sunken lands, and world-ending deluges echo the upheaval of this period. Were these simply symbolic stories, or were they the encoded memories of real catastrophes? Our next step takes us from archaeology into the oldest stories humanity has ever told, searching for traces of the Younger Dryas in myth. Across the globe, cultures separated by oceans and millennia share remarkably similar flood narratives. A great flood that nearly wiped out humanity, whether etched into cuneiform tablets in Mesopotamia, whispered in Aboriginal traditions in Australia, or preserved in the oral histories of Native American elders, the parallels are striking. Different names, different settings, same core story. The world drowns, only a few survive, and civilization must start over. When we line these myths side by side, the question becomes unavoidable. Were they merely symbolic tales of destruction and renewal, or do they preserve memories of a real event? Consider one of the most famous Mesopotamia's epic of Gilgamesh. Written on clay tablets thousands of years ago, it tells of Utnapishtim, a man warned by the gods of an impending flood. He constructs a massive vessel, loads it with his family, animals, and supplies, and survives as the waters rise to cover the land. When the flood subsides, his boat rests on a mountain, and life begins anew. Even older than Gilgamesh is the Atrahasis epic, telling nearly the same story. What's remarkable is how closely these tales resemble the later biblical story of Noah, including details like releasing birds to test whether the land had dried. Did each culture independently invent this story, or were they remembering the same traumatic event that reshaped their world? The Greeks too had a flood narrative. They spoke of Deucalion and Pyrrha, a couple chosen by Zeus to survive when humanity's wickedness provoked divine wrath. They floated in the wooden chest for 9 days and nights, until the waters receded. Once ashore, they repopulated the earth by casting stones over their shoulders, which transformed into men and women. Here again we see the same pattern: divine warning, survival via a vessel, and the rebirth of humanity after catastrophe. If these stories were only moral lessons, why do they map so consistently onto real physical disasters at the end of the Ice Age? In India, flood myths run deep as well. Hindu texts tell of Manu, the first man, who was warned by a giant fish of a coming flood. Manu built a boat and tied it to the fish, which guided him safely to the Himalayas. From there, he repopulated the earth. Across cultures, the same essential story emerges: catastrophe, survival, and the fragile rebirth of human civilization. Like the Mesopotamian and Greek stories, this narrative features a chosen survivor, a vessel, and the rescue of life from catastrophic floods. The flood is more than a disaster, it becomes a turning point, a reset for human civilization. Consider India, where rapid post-glacial sea level rise dramatically reshaped coastlines. Could these myths preserve the memory of shorelines vanishing beneath the waves? Further west, Native American traditions also recount waters that engulfed the world. The Hopi speak of multiple ages ending in great floods, where survivors sought refuge in reeds or were guided underground by spirit beings. The Ojibwa of the Great Lakes tell how animals and humans worked together to restore the land, with the muskrat diving deep to bring up soil so new ground could form. These aren't isolated tales, they reflect a consistent motif: water swallowing the land, humanity nearly perishing, and life beginning anew. Even far from the ice sheets, the pattern continues. Aboriginal Australians maintain oral traditions dating back tens of thousands of years, describing rising seas that drowned land bridges and severed islands from the mainland. Remarkably, these accounts align with geological evidence showing post-Ice Age sea level rise, when coastlines advanced inland by hundreds of kilometers. Entire hunting grounds and settlements were lost forever. Imagine the impact on communities who lived through this. Their homelands gone, their stories reshaped by survival and loss. No wonder these memories persisted orally for millennia. The universality of these flood myths is striking. Cultures separated by oceans and mountains, with no contact, all share variations of the same story: divine or cosmic warning, catastrophic inundation, chosen survivors, and humanity's rebirth. Could it really be coincidence, or are these fragments of a single global memory? The Younger Dryas may have echoed across the world through story and song. In societies without writing, oral tradition became the archive. Details shifted, gods and symbols changed, yet the core remained: a world-destroying flood. Some scholars argue that flood myths convey symbolic truths, the cycles of destruction and renewal, human fragility, moral lessons. But what if those symbolic layers were built atop real events remembered by traumatized survivors? Imagine witnessing walls of meltwater bursting from glacial lakes, smoke darkening the skies from continent-spanning wildfires, the ground shaking as ice sheets collapsed. For people living near rivers and coasts, which was most of humanity, these were not mere natural disasters. They would have felt like the end of the world. Wouldn't you tell that story to your children? And wouldn't they pass it down? Here lies the enduring mystery. If the Younger Dryas floods and upheavals were truly global, then countless early settlements, particularly those along coastlines, may now rest beneath the ocean, lost under 100 meters of water. Could this be why so many myths speak of sunken lands and drowned cities? Plato's Atlantis, though written later, follows the same pattern: a proud civilization swallowed in a single day and night by the ocean. Across the globe, traces of similar lost communities appear in local legends, from Lyonesse off Cornwall to Kumarikandam in India. Are these mere coincidences, or faint memories of real settlements erased by rising seas at the end of the Ice Age? Remarkably, modern science and ancient myth may be telling the same story. The black mat layer found across North America, filled with soot, nanodiamonds, and melted materials, points to wildfires and possible cosmic impacts during the Younger Dryas. Geological studies confirm episodes of rapid sea level rise, sometimes by meters, in just a single century. Archaeology shows cultures disappearing or regressing during this period. Yet myths recorded thousands of years later preserve details that align uncannily with these findings. Could these stories be more than allegories? Could they represent humanity's oldest historical record? Perhaps these flood myths are not just tales of gods punishing humankind. They may be coded accounts of a natural catastrophe so immense it left a permanent mark on human memory. And if the world truly drowned once, what might it have taken with it? Entire civilizations, forgotten technologies, the earliest chapters of human history? More importantly, what remnants did it leave behind, waiting to be discovered in stone circles, sunken ruins, or stories that survived long after the waters receded? When we examine these flood traditions side by side, the question becomes inevitable. What happened next? Who survived? And what did they build in the aftermath? This question brings us to one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries of the past century: Göbekli Tepe and the broader network of tepe sites scattered across southeastern Turkey. From a distance, Göbekli Tepe looks unremarkable, a scrubby hill once assumed to be natural. Left untouched for centuries, it wasn't until the 1992 that archaeologists began to excavate, and what they uncovered stunned the world. Vast stone circles crowned with T-shaped pillars, some standing 15 feet tall and weighing over 10 tons. These were not hastily assembled rocks. They were carefully quarried, carved, transported, and deliberately arranged a level of planning and skill far beyond what had been expected for the time. What makes this even more remarkable is the age. The site dates to around 9600 BC, right at the end of the Younger Dryas. In other words, this monumental construction emerged almost immediately after the thousand-year catastrophe, when humanity should have been struggling simply to survive. Instead, people were moving multi-ton stones, carving intricate images, foxes, vultures, snakes, boars, and abstract patterns whose meanings remain a mystery. Archaeologists often call it the world's first temple, but even that label barely conveys its scale. Imagine a circle of massive limestone slabs surrounding two towering central pillars, their surfaces alive with carvings, animals leaping, birds poised with wings outstretched, snakes coiling across stone. Some figures are human, those stylized headless forms and abstract humanoid shapes. Entering such an enclosure would have been awe-inspiring, perhaps terrifying, for the people of that era. And Göbekli Tepe was not alone. Across the Tash Tepe region, literally stone hills, archaeologists have uncovered more than a dozen similar sites. Kara Tepe, just 35 kilometers away, is equally staggering, offering further evidence of a culture capable of monumental planning, sophisticated labor organization, and symbolic expression far earlier than anyone had imagined. At some sites, rows of phallic-shaped pillars rise from chambers carved directly into bedrock, while nearby T-shaped monoliths echo the design of Göbekli Tepe itself. At places like Sefa Tepe, Habet Suvan Tepe, and others, the same themes appear again and again. Carefully arranged megaliths, intricate carvings, and layouts that suggest ritual or symbolic purpose. Taken together, these sites point to more than isolated anomalies. They hint at a shared cultural explosion, a network of communities engaged in monumental construction during the earliest days of the Holocene. And yet these builders had no metal tools, no wheels, no domesticated animals for heavy lifting. Conventional wisdom suggests they were still hunter-gatherers, people moving with the seasons, foraging and hunting. And yet, here they were, coordinating hundreds of workers to create architectural feats that would challenge even Bronze Age societies. Did they really achieve all this in a single generation? Or is there a deeper story hidden among the stones? Some scholars suggest Göbekli Tepe and the other tepe sites represent the crucible of civilization itself. In this view, communal ritual gatherings forced large-scale cooperation, which may have led to agriculture, not the other way around. Here, religion or shared cosmology came first, and farming followed as a way to sustain those drawn to the rituals. It's as if the temple came before the farm, Others propose a more mysterious scenario. Perhaps the builders inherited knowledge from survivors of an earlier culture wiped out by the Younger Dryas. Göbekli Tepe then becomes less a beginning and more a rebirth, the first attempt to reconstruct civilization after a cataclysm. The carvings themselves fuel speculation. One pillar, nicknamed the Vulture Stone, has been interpreted by some as a star map, with animals representing constellations. According to this theory, the stone encodes a memory of a comet strike around 10,900 BC, the very event proposed by some researchers as the trigger for the Younger Dryas. While mainstream archaeologists remain skeptical, the possibility that these stones preserve astronomical knowledge keeps the debate alive. Were these just symbolic animals, or something far more an ancient record of a world-shattering event carved in stone? Even the way the site was treated adds mystery. Around 8000 BC, after centuries of use, Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried. Its enclosures were carefully backfilled, preserving them in extraordinary condition for millennia. Why go to such lengths to bury a masterpiece? Was it ritual closure, a cultural choice to move on, or a message for the future, a time capsule meant to be discovered thousands of years later? The debate between mainstream archaeologists and alternative theorists only adds to the site's allure. To academics, Göbekli Tepe demonstrates that humans were capable of far more in the pre-agricultural world than previously believed. To others, it hints at a lost chapter of human history, an echo of an advanced society erased by the floods, preserved only in myths and these mysterious stone circles. Both sides agree on one thing. The site has rewritten our understanding of human beginnings. And it's not just Göbekli Tepe. Kara Tepe's subterranean chambers, with their phallic pillars, suggest rituals whose meaning remains obscure. Across the Tashtapela region, multiple enclosures imply a network of sacred sites connected by shared beliefs or seasonal gatherings. The broader picture is one of astonishing complexity, a cultural landscape that forces us to reconsider what human communities were capable of 12,000 years ago. Step back and consider the timing, the symbolism, and the sheer scale of these early megalithic projects. One question keeps coming to the surface. Were these monuments humanity's first attempt to rebuild civilization after the flood? If the Younger Dryas was indeed the cataclysm remembered in myths worldwide, then Göbekli Tepe and its sister sites may reflect the survivors' efforts and attempt to carve memory, ritual, and perhaps even warnings into stone. As we continue, we'll see how other ancient traditions, from myths of gods and giants to tales of forgotten golden ages, intersect with these enigmatic stone circles. Whether you view Göbekli Tepe as the birthplace of organized religion, the cradle of agriculture, or the last echo of a lost world, one thing is clear: it marks a threshold. Beyond it, history starts to appear less like a steady progression from primitive to advanced, and more like a story with missing chapters, erased by flood, fire, and catastrophe, whispered back to us through stone. Leaving the stone circles of Turkey behind, our trail leads southwest into Egypt's deserts, home to one of the world's most iconic monuments. The great Sphinx of Giza lion's body, human head, carved from bedrock, stands silently guarding the pyramids. But beneath its familiar form lies a debate that touches the heart of the Younger Dryas story. Some researchers suggest the Sphinx may preserve the scars of the Great Flood itself. Mainstream Egyptology dates the Sphinx to around 2500 BC, during Pharaoh Khafre's reign, viewing it as a dynastic monument symbolizing royal power and divine authority. But in the early 1992s, geologist Robert Schoch and independent researcher John Anthony West challenged this narrative. They noted that the Sphinx enclosure, the walls surrounding the monument, shows deep, rounded weathering patterns, more consistent with rainfall erosion than with wind or sand. Here's the issue. Egypt hasn't experienced sustained heavy rainfall since long before dynastic times. The last period of significant rainfalls occurred at the end of the Ice Age, roughly 10,000 years ago, right at the close of the Younger Dryas. Schoch and West argued that the Sphinx, or at least its core structure, could be far older than mainstream archaeology admits. Instead of a Bronze Age creation, it might date to 7,000, 9,000 BC, surviving from a time when Egypt's climate was radically different. If true, this would mean Egypt inherited the Sphinx from a lost culture, one that endured the chaos of the Younger Dryas, and left behind this enduring monument as evidence of their existence. Critics counter that the erosion could be explained by other factors like subsurface water or unique weathering conditions, and they point to stylistic similarities with Old Kingdom art. Yet the argument persists. Even geologists, unaffiliated with Schoch, have admitted the weathering resembles water damage far more than wind could create. Adding intrigue, the Sphinx has no clear inscriptions tying it definitively to Khafre, widening cracks in the Orthodox timeline. Layered on top of this are Egypt's own flood traditions, hinting that the monument may be preserving stories older than the dynasties themselves. The Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt, has always been tied to cycles of flooding, fertility, and destruction. Ancient texts speak of the Zeptepi, or first time, a mythical golden age when gods ruled the land before human kingship took hold. Some see this as symbolic prehistory, but others wonder if it preserves memories of a vanished pre-dynastic civilization, one possibly wiped out by floodwaters. The imagery of the Nile, overflowing its banks and reshaping the land, might reflect far older events, perhaps even traces of the Younger Dryas deluge. If the Sphinx truly predates dynastic Egypt, its builders would have known a very different Giza, lush, storm-lashed, and far wetter than the desert we see today. Survivors of an earlier culture may have carved the Sphinx as part of a sacred site, its lion's body a symbol of strength, its human face a tribute to rulers or culture bringers now lost to time. Later dynasties could have inherited the monument, restoring its head and reshaping details while weaving it into their own narrative, leaving the original creators to fade into legend. The Sphinx also reframes the pyramids. If it is indeed older, it suggests the Giza Plateau was already sacred long before Khufu, Khafre, or Menkaure built their tombs. Perhaps the pyramids were designed to align with or echo an older tradition rooted in memories of cataclysm. Whether you accept the orthodox view or a radical reinterpretation, the Sphinx remains a mystery. Its silent gaze has endured millennia of storms, sand, and speculation, refusing to reveal its origins. Was it truly carved in the age of the pharaohs, or is it a relic of the Ice Age, etched by the rains of a vanished world? If the latter, the Sphinx may be one of humanity's oldest monuments, a testament to survival in the aftermath of global catastrophe. And it raises a haunting question. If the Sphinx bears the scars of the Great Flood, what else might lie buried beneath Egypt's sands? Lost structures, records, or entire chapters of human history swept away when the Younger Dryas reshaped the world? Mainstream historians often credit these walls to the Incas, yet even they admit much of the construction was inherited, built on foundations whose origins remain a mystery. The Incas themselves claim to have inherited large portions of their infrastructure from earlier peoples. Could it be that they were caretakers of a much older legacy, one stretching back to a time when catastrophic floods and environmental upheavals forced survivors to retreat to higher ground, far from vulnerable coastlines? Shifting east, we arrive in Southeast Asia and the story of the sunken continent, sometimes called Sundaland. During the Ice Age, massive landmasses connected modern Malaysia, Indonesia, and surrounding islands into a vast habitable expanse. But as sea levels rose at the end of the Younger Dryas, most of this landscape vanished beneath the waves, leaving only scattered islands. Ancient legends recall a drowned homeland, echoing flood myths from around the world. Could Sunderland have supported complex societies now lost beneath more than 100 meters of ocean? Evidence for sunken civilizations emerges elsewhere too. Off the coast of Japan, divers exploring near Yonaguni discovered terraces, step platforms, and what appeared to be pathways carved into stone. Some argue it is a natural formation shaped by tectonics and erosion. Others insist the sharp angles, stair-like structures, and possible carvings point to human construction, perhaps a city swallowed when post-Ice Age seas surged. Closer to Europe lies Doggerland, the lost land beneath the North Sea. Once a fertile plain connecting Britain to continental Europe, it teemed with wildlife and human settlements between 6,500 and 6,000 BC. Rising seas drowned it, forcing Mesolithic communities to move inland. Fishermen today still pull up mammoth bones, oxen remains, and ancient tools from its depths. Imagine witnessing your homeland vanish as forests, rivers, and villages disappeared beneath the waves. Oral traditions may have preserved those memories, shaping myths of devastating floods. The Black Sea offers another striking example. Around 5600 BC, Mediterranean waters are thought to have burst through the Bosporus, flooding the Black Sea basin and dramatically raising its level. Some geologists suggest this deluge inspired the biblical flood story and other regional myths. Archaeological evidence of submerged shorelines and settlements supports the idea. For the people living there, the event would have been catastrophic. Familiar farmlands lost, coastlines redrawn virtually overnight. What connects all these places, Tiwanaku, Sachiwaman, Sundaland, Yonaguni, Doggerland, the Black Sea, is a haunting possibility. The Younger Dryas and its aftermath did more than reshape climates. It may have wiped out entire chapters of human history, sweeping away coastal settlements and forcing survivors to start over on higher ground. If early civilizations clustered along fertile coasts and river valleys, how many are now hidden beneath the waves, visible only through scattered myths and enigmatic ruins? The tantalizing question remains, if so many coastlines were swallowed by the sea, how many civilizations advanced, experimental, or even proto-urban lie waiting beneath the ocean, waiting to be rediscovered? And when fragments of them finally surface, could they rewrite our understanding of when humanity first began to build, plan, and organize? Across cultures worldwide, there's a strikingly recurring figure, the post-disaster teacher. These aren't gods in the usual sense, but beings described as wise, skilled, and markedly different from ordinary humans. They appear after floods or catastrophes, guiding communities shattered by calamity back toward order. The consistency of these stories across continents raises a fascinating question. Are they mere archetypes of renewal, or could they be distant echoes of real survivors carrying knowledge from a forgotten world? Take Mesopotamia, for instance. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, a pantheon of powerful beings who once ruled the earth before kingship passed to humans. In their texts, the flood marks a boundary, separating these primordial rulers from mortal dynasties. Were the Anunnaki purely symbolic, representing natural forces and social order, or could they reflect memories of a vanished pre-flood civilization? Some dismiss them as myth, but the detailed lists of rulers and reigns hint at possible fragments of distant history disguised as legend. A similar motif appears in Mesoamerica. Among the Aztecs, Quetzalcoatl is depicted as a feathered serpent deity, but also as a culture bringer, teaching agriculture, law, and urban organization. Legends describe him emerging after cycles of destruction, including great floods, to guide humanity back toward civilization. The Maya had Kukulkan, almost identical in role and symbolism. Were these beings purely imagined or mythologized accounts of leaders who survived catastrophe and passed on crucial knowledge? In the Andes, Viracocha emerges as a strikingly similar figure. According to local tradition, he rose from Lake Titicaca after a massive flood, teaching survivors architecture, farming, and moral codes before disappearing across the sea. Spanish chroniclers emphasized that Viracocha wasn't just a god in the abstract sense, but a tall human-like figure whose presence inspired awe. The parallels with Oannes in Mesopotamia, a fish-like teacher emerging from the Persian Gulf to instruct humanity in writing, agriculture, and city building are uncanny. Two civilizations separated by oceans both remember a teacher rising from water to restore what was lost. Even in North America, similar traditions persist. Among the Hopi, the Ant people sheltered humanity underground during catastrophes and taught survival skills until the world was safe again. Across the Great Plains, stories recall giants and culture heroes who lived before a great flood, some destroyed, others passing on knowledge to future generations. And in India, Hindu texts tell of Manu saved by a giant fish during a catastrophic flood and instructed in how to rebuild society. Later, sages and rishis appear in the New Age, carrying preserved wisdom from earlier times, laying the foundations for civilization anew. What's especially intriguing is that these post-catastrophe figures almost never appear before destruction, they arrive afterward. They don't create civilizations from scratch. Instead, they act as restorers, rebuilding from memory. This raises a fascinating possibility. Were these culture bringers actually survivors of pre-Younger Dryas societies, carrying forward fragments of architecture, astronomy, and farming knowledge into a new era? If so, the myths may not be mere metaphors, but storytelling vessels preserving the memory of real people who, to traumatized survivors, must have seemed godlike. Archaeology hints at cultural continuities that support this idea. Gobekli Tepe emerges suddenly with advanced iconography. The Sumerian king list speaks of rulers before the flood. In South America, megalithic walls display astonishing precision. Agricultural knowledge spreads rapidly after 9600 BC. These moments make history feel less like a gradual climb and more like a reset. Someone hit restart, leaving behind fragments of an older, greater program. So what about figures like the Anunnaki, Viracocha, Quetzalcoatl, and countless others? Are they myths born of human imagination, universal archetypes responding to trauma? Or are they faint but persistent memories of real teachers, survivors of the Younger Dryas catastrophe, who preserved fragments of a world that had nearly drowned? If the planet really collapsed around 12,800 years ago, humanity may not have had just one beginning. There may have been multiple resets, each punctuated by disaster, with survivors elevated into legend. Perhaps when ancient scribes spoke of gods walking among men, they were really referring to those who remembered. The debate sharpens when we examine those trying to piece together these mysteries. Some argue the Younger Dryas wasn't just a climate hiccup, but a cataclysm that wiped out an entire chapter of human history. Others caution that speculation mustn't be mistaken for evidence. Either way, the clash of ideas is part of what makes this story compelling. One prominent voice is Graham Hancock. In Magicians of the Gods, he argues that the Younger Dryas flood buried a civilization more advanced than generally acknowledged, a society of magicians who preserved fragments of knowledge and helped reignite human progress. For Hancock, sites like Gobekli Tepe are not anomalies. They are fingerprints of this lost chapter, survivors leaving stone records where oral memory might fail. Critics accuse him of cherry-picking evidence and leaning too heavily on myth, yet his skill lies in weaving floods, sunken ruins, and unexplained monuments into a haunting, coherent picture. What if we've lost far more than we realize? Alongside him, Randall Carlson examines catastrophic geology. He points to landscapes such as Washington State's scablands, shaped by sudden massive floods. Once dismissed as impossible, mainstream geology now acknowledges that the Missoula floods at the end of the Ice Age carved those canyons in days rather than millennia. Carlson suggests the Younger Dryas may have involved events on an even grander scale, rupturing glacial lakes, torrents sweeping across continents, fire and flood working in tandem. His warning is simple but unsettling. If cataclysm reshaped North America, it could have erased human settlements along the way. Robert Schoch takes a similar approach in Egypt, focusing on the Sphinx. His water erosion hypothesis notes deep weathering patterns consistent with prolonged rainfall conditions Egypt hasn't seen since the end of the Ice Age. Could monuments like the Sphinx carry traces of a much earlier, forgotten world, one shaped by floods and climatic upheaval? If Schoch is right, the Sphinx could have been carved thousands of years before the dynasties of pharaohs, perhaps even in the shadow of the Younger Dryas. Mainstream Egyptology bristles at the idea, yet it persists. Could the world's most iconic monument be a survivor from a flood-swept era long forgotten? On the other side, many academics acknowledge the evidence of abrupt change floods, fires, and climate upheaval, but stop short of linking it to a lost civilization. They point to the black mat layer found across continents, a band of soot, carbon, and nanodiamonds marking a violent environmental shift around 12,800 years ago. They note the abrupt collapse of the Clovis culture, the extinctions of Ice Age megafauna, and the striking synchronicity of disasters. What they resist is the leap from catastrophe to an advanced pre-flood civilization. Their caution is rooted in evidence, not skepticism of imagination. This is the tension, is the pushback against Hancock, Carlson, and Schoch about protecting academic rigor or protecting the timeline itself. If Gobekli Tepe, the Sphinx, or other monuments are far older than we think, if flood myths preserve kernels of real history, then the linear story of human progress, primitive to advanced, step by step starts to unravel. Civilization may have risen, fallen, and risen again multiple times, and our current society might only be the latest iteration. We face a philosophical choice as much as a scientific one. Do we read the record strictly as it presents itself, cautious not to exceed what can be proved? Or do we follow the hints, the whispers, the smoke rising from events long buried, and wonder if the world truly drowned once before and what it took with it? Looking back, it's impossible not to imagine the terror and awe of living through the Younger Dryas. One day, rivers flowed, animals roamed, and human communities thrived. The next, chaos descended. Walls of water tore through valleys, coastlines vanished beneath the sea, and fires blotted out the Sunday. Entire cultures scrambled to survive, seeking high ground or fleeing inland, leaving behind only scattered artifacts and echoes of stories carried across generations. Perhaps the most haunting element is the silence that followed the missing layers in archaeology, the myths preserving warnings, the ruins that seem older than they should be. From Mesopotamian flood legends to Mesoamerican tales, from stone circles in Turkey to the weathered face of the Sphinx, and the theorists daring to suggest that the earliest chapters of human history are missing, the threads converge. They don't give every answer, but they hint that humanity's past may contain entire civilizations still hidden beneath the waves, buried beneath sand, or lost to time, and we've only begun to uncover them. Entire coastlines now lie submerged beneath more than 100 meters of ocean. Whole landscapes, Doggerland in Europe, Sunderland in Southeast Asia, even drowned river valleys in the Americas await rediscovery. If a global flood truly reshaped the world 12,000 years ago, How many cities, temples, or entire cultures were swept away by the waters? And yet survivors endured, they rebuilt, they remembered, they passed down warnings in the only way they could, through story. These stories still echo across continents and millennia, carrying fragments of an age erased but not entirely forgotten. Whether we interpret them as myths, metaphors, or encoded memories, they remain among humanity's oldest inheritances. The mystery endures. Was Younger Dryas simply nature at its most chaotic, or the origin of the Great Flood, remembered in myth? Did it obliterate civilizations we have yet to rediscover, or was it the crucible that forced humanity to start over, laying the foundations of the world we recognize today? The question is yours to ponder. Was the legendary flood a real event tied to the Younger Dryas, or a remarkable coincidence that so many cultures remembered water as the ultimate destroyer? Share your thoughts and theories, because these are mysteries best explored together. And if you've enjoyed this journey into one of the most dramatic chapters in human history, subscribe for more explorations of lost civilizations, unexplained ruins, and the secrets still hidden in our past. As always, stay curious and keep looking for the stories the Earth has yet to reveal. If you found this dive into lost civilizations, sunken cities, and the mysteries of the Younger Dryas as mind-blowing as I did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps me keep exploring these incredible stories for you. Drop your theories in the comments. Did the world really drown 12,000 years ago? Or are these just myths echoing through time? I want to hear what you think. And remember, the past is full of secrets still waiting to be uncovered. So stay curious, stay exploring, and I'll see you in the next adventure.